Good morning and welcome to another videocast by Hindi Consulting, the specialist management consulting firm for the $120 billion FPD display industry. And today we want to talk about the waves of technology transfers around the industry, pretty much as far back as we can remember, and try and give you a history of that and then put that in context of the current moves that are going on between Japan and China, and actually then between Taiwan and India right now, and talk about there's sort of pretty similar motivations around moving technology, selling factories, and providing technology packages from donors that are at the higher end of the technology scale but lack real capacity to people receiving who want to be market entrants. So anyway, that's the topic for today. So the first two waves of technology transfers, the first one, as far as I'm concerned, was from the wave of Japan into Taiwan. This was around 1999 to 2002, and a couple of really good examples were Sharp went a technology transfer agreement with Quanta in Taiwan, and then DTI, which was IBM Japan, to Chime a few years later. But there actually were a number of these, and this is how Taiwan got into the LCD business. Korea, interestingly, got into the LCD business pretty much on its own with its own technology. So that really wasn't a technology transfer as such. So you could sort of see two strands of DNA in the display industry. One started in Japan with all of the Gen 2 work that was basically built around factories in Japan, and then Korea had its own path. The second wave then of technology transfers was from Japan to China, and this was a little bit later, happened over a little bit of a longer period, but includes deals such as the JV between SVA and NEC, so that was Japanese technology going into a joint venture in China, and then actually the sale of a factory package along with technology from Sharp to CC Panda a few years later, and there were a number of those also. So what you can see is that these technology transfers are a mixture of transfer of technology, sometimes also of assets. So sometimes they go along with a factory that actually gets moved and then staffed by the company selling. And typically then on the receiving end, it's basically a market entry strategy for the company buying. Although for a period of time, often what is used is a joint venture for a while, and then shares are sold down as some sort of exit. So this sort of pattern has happened at least twice. So then if we look at my own innovation ranking, this is my sort of low to high on innovation capabilities in the display industry, with then specific companies put against it, right? So the lowest level is the ability just to buy equipment and put together a standard amorphous silicon LCD line. And broadly, if you spend 5 years, if you buy the equipment, and if you can get some sort of technology agreement or a group of engineers to come and help you ramp the line, this is something that can be done. And so there are quite a number of players in display land that are down at the lowest level that have either started and remained with one fab, or they've started with one fab and then grown from there. HKC, that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this deck, is one such company. They were a monitor player in China and went backwards into display making. What we're going to talk about here is the high end of the ladder also, in terms of who are the technology donors. So right at the top of the scale are LGD and SDC. They're actually the most capable, and they're both Korean. They've actually stayed out of this tech transfer business so far, and I think they have considered it internally, but I don't know if there's any deals yet that have been struck on that basis. Then you can see that one of the companies that are going to be quite a lot in this story are actually the Japanese, who actually technically I would put at level 4 here, with arguably Sharp a little higher up the JDI, but both actually technologically have a lot to bring to the table to the display industry. And so they are extremely suitable donors. They have relatively small capacities themselves, but have a lot to bring to the industry. And the key thing for me is the quality of the collaboration agreement, the HR incentives, and how well you pull off a combination plan to actually get that technology moved, because it's very easy to sign an agreement, but if the engineers don't want to go to China or wherever to pull it off, and the incentives aren't in place to make it work, then it won't be so successful. So now we're looking at waves actually 3 and 4. The one we're going to talk about a little bit in this deck now is the JDI agreement with HKC. And there's also a discussion and an MOU signed now of transfer of technology from Taiwan, from Innolux to Vedanta in India. And that's interesting in itself. You've got a level 2 or 2.5 technology donor still being effective at being able to bring tier 1 technology to a new geography. So, the Koreans have chosen to sit it out, but the Taiwanese and the Japanese, and arguably some of the better Chinese, could actually get into the technology donating game if new countries want to participate in displays. Now, all I would argue is that Japan should be very careful about how they price their technology. If you think about the innovation ladder, then access to the top rungs comes from a combination of raw engineering capability, but then access particularly to polysilicon oxide, a combination of the two as hardcore TFT technologies, with then some understanding of OLED processing and perhaps something novel like inkjet printing. And all of these technologies are found in Japan. So both Sharp and JDI, to different degrees, have real depth of technology, because even though Sharp has never really been an OLED company, they've been playing with all technologies in their skunk works for a long time, and Sharp is a highly capable technology company, JDI also. So the only thing I would want to make sure here is, if you think about the big pantheon of 20 years, it's not clear to me that Japan ever benefited enough economically from having donated or having used their technology to bring others into this industry. And I think it's really important that they think about the economic structure of the deals they cut if they're going to enable others to come in. Now, do we want more players in the display industry? Now, this one I'm on the fence. We have an industry that has the top 6 players are 80% of revenues, so that's somewhat consolidated. But within that, you've got 2 players, so SDC and LGD, that are the OLED leaders, and then 4 players in LCD. But really, the 2 Chinese, BOE and China Star, have quite a strong stranglehold on LCD numbers. So I actually think, arguably, we could think about a slightly more globally diversified player set. Now, I do think the converse of that is, I do think that to be able to put together a fundamental new technology innovation, you need to be at level 4 to level 5 on the innovation ladder. That does require a certain amount of scale and capability. And so part of me also wants not to increase the number of players in the display industry, typically because that tends to be competing down to lower pricing, and you don't get the number of players you need with serious innovation capabilities. So let's have a quick look at the HKC-JDI deal. And it's really interesting, but I mean, if you look at the two, let's do a little bit of profiling. JDI is on level 4 of the ladder easily. They're one of the more technically capable companies with both LCD and OLED. They have very strong capabilities oxide and capabilities with the engineers pulled back from JOLED and printed OLED. They really have something to bring to the table, but their own capacity is very small. Now, they did have more fabs than this, but this is my understanding based on fab closures, and I may be a little behind here, but we're talking about 3 million square meters, a drop in the ocean on the total sort of 400 million square meters of the industry. Whereas HKC came from nowhere and is already 40 million square meters. Now, that's bigger than AUO, bigger than Innolux. This is a very large company, but it's a technology level 1 here, and really arguably is. Now, they've been looking to innovate, but I think without a fundamental source of technology, that'll be very difficult. So this is a marriage potentially made in heaven if they can execute it well, and if Japan gets enough fair value. And the worry I would have is either HKC tries to nickel and dime JDI down, and so that Japan doesn't get a fair deal out of this game, or that the whole incentive structure around actually making this work isn't correctly set up. It's very easy to try and strike a deal where actually the Japanese want to sit on their hands and not transfer technology elsewhere. Now, I can see why they might emotionally want to do that, but if you actually want to make this work, I think the combination of JDI and HKC, capacity and technology, could be really interesting. They're both financially not the best shakes, so, I mean, it would be nice to recapitalize this whole company and then think very carefully about what they're going to do. So far, their plan seems to be monitors, automotive, VR panels and high-end IT. Not quite a easy set of bedfellows, but I think a little bit of work on market strategy and then very careful thinking about the incentives of the transfer agreement, that's what's important. Because if we take another one of these technology transfers, or at least when Terry Goh ended up cutting the deal that enabled him to be a shareholder of Sharp, on the bottom left here is my own integration plan of what you could have done if you put Sharp and Innolux together and actually made a really good go of it. And it's you could have produced potentially one of the industry's true leaders in terms of technology capability and breadth of capacity. But it just didn't seem to have happened. What seems to have happened is that the Japanese management basically said, leave us alone and manage us at arm's length, and the Taiwanese agreed. And I think that's a very big shame, actually, because I think you could have put together a player which in total could have had some real capabilities if some heads had been knocked together. So technology transfer agreements are good as a notion, but the whole thing about HR incentives, financial incentives, economic incentives to make sure these things happen is critically important in putting together those deals. So fine, just a quick summary and recap of where we've been. Waves 1 and 2 were technology transfer out of Japan, first to Taiwan and then Japan to China, going back 2 decades. This is now what I would call almost rounds 3 and 4, and so you've got Japan potentially choosing to donate again to China, and even Taiwan now being high enough up the innovation ladder to be able to donate technology on a potential deal with Vedanta. I think the key thing in all of these deals is making sure the fair value, but also the incentives and HR structures and everything works out so that you actually achieve the benefits that could be on the table, and that the execution of those agreements becomes critically important. So finally, a little bit, and I always like to do this at the end of my videos, Hendy Consulting is a management consulting company to the display industry, and how we're different to market research is market research tends to follow a set of defined questions about market sizing, pricing, trends, or future investments. A factor is sort of factual data that you can go out and collect primary research on, whereas managed consulting is typically of the order of helping companies to understand whether the technology they have is any good, how to collaborate with the display industry, whether they should build capacity either as display fabs or in the supply chain, and how they can mitigate risk and how they can plan in the best way, and then how they can position their business best for success. So it's a different set of questions delivered by me and my team coming to potentially work with you as members of your teams. It's a more together working style, answering a different set of business problems to market research. And if anything of that is interesting to you, I would hope that you would drop a note back in LinkedIn or contact us back by email. Now, for the people watching this on YouTube, this is video number 44, and there are plenty of others like this, and we will be posting hopefully about 3 times a week on an ongoing basis. So there'll be then a basis of information of understanding the display industry. And Hendy Consulting has done a lot of work across a very large number of domains. In particular, recently we've done a lot of micro-LED work, but we've done OLED work, LCD work, equipment work, materials work, and then across a whole range of different types of project structure. So again, if there's anything we can help you with, it would be great if you'd drop us a note back. Have a good day. Bye-bye.